Let's move now to Amendment 2. Councilmember Rosenberger, would you like to move its introduction?
Sure, Councilmember Rollo. I move we adopt Amendment 2 to Resolution 2202.
Second.
Okay, it's been introduced. Would you please summarize it for us?
Sure. Amendment 02 just strikes some language from the resolution and in effect would keep the Transportation Committee. Well, I brought this amendment for many of the same reasons Amendment 1 was brought, so not a positive outlook here, but I think it's pretty important to keep the Transportation Committee. It gets used right now with sidewalks, and I mean, I know also with sidewalks, we have a pretty good rubric in place nowadays for the allocation of that funding, and I think that's awesome work. I think similarly that there's still a lot of work to do here. Of course, did we all vote yes on the budget? And with the talking to the administration, you know, we've got that $1 million a year coming for bike ped infrastructure or sustainability work in the city. And I think, you know, focusing on all modes of transportation for that, it's going to require a lot of discussions, right? A lot of ideas, a lot of fact finding and research, a lot of working with the administration, working with different community groups, working with residents, working with different departments at the city, working with county and county elected officials, you know, looking at transit for that expands out into the county, looking at bike paths to different counties across our city. I mean, there's just so much, the list goes on, right? And it's similar, it's so very similar and like deeply rooted in climate action that I think it makes sense to also keep this committee. It's also something, again, that we could have it, and if no one ever wanted to use it, if 5 people didn't, you know, want to use it, wouldn't have to, or if people didn't want to listen to the work that it did, you wouldn't have to. It's pretty much kind of whatever you want to do. It would just be nice if it could stay in existence. So that's pretty much what I've got for this. I feel like I'm being a little repetitive. I think this is a good compromise to keep this committee intact so it can be used here if we want. I think it would just be really awesome if we could get a little compromise, I guess, on this resolution. I think this seems real small, and it would be great. I can say the word proactive, preventative work to be done. I mean, we've talked about that already. Another thing, you know, just talking about, this is mostly last week, but the idea that we can create special committees to do all kinds of different things, but I think that honestly adds to the confusion, especially for city residents, so they don't know who to contact for what. As it stands now, we have Councilmember Smith as the chair of the Transportation Committee, and I know folks in the community reached out to him as the chair to talk about important work and accessibility and mobility. And I think it would be just more difficult for residents to get involved in exactly what they want if we don't have that go-to person on a topic that is just near and dear to most everyone's heart, because everyone moves about in some way, shape, or form. So that's what I have for Amendment 2. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary. We'll go to council questions first of all. So who would like to begin? Councilmember Volin.
I'd like to hear what the sponsors think of the amendment.
Sponsors, Councilmember Scambaluri.
Yes, thanks. Actually, I was going to ask a question related to that. One of the statements we've heard for the 2 amendments so far is leave it, essentially, I'm summarizing here, but leave it in the code, even if we don't use it, it's okay if it's still there. Help me understand that viewpoint better. Should we always have things in code that we might use? I mean, or does that simply clutter up a code?
So, Councilmember Schimballuri, just in the order of things, I
Right.
think a question was issued to the sponsors. You responded with sort of a rhetorical question.
Well,
Before we go to the to your question, is that your response to Councilmember Volan's question?
yeah, in a way it is. I mean, that is my reaction to amendments. Is it seems like part of the argument is leave them there, they don't do any harm. And yet I've heard that same argument. I've heard the opposite of that argued to clean things up, and when we clean up code or adjust things. So I'm wondering when it's okay to have things in code, or when it's okay to have resolutions for things that we just might use. How do you differentiate between them?
City code is littered with items that are used only once in a great while, or haven't been used in years. I would challenge you to go and identify, all the different, aspects that you think should be cleaned up. Of course, that is the kind of thing that an admin committee or a rules committee could do. But I mean, that's, I think it's up to you to identify what aspects of code you think are such dead weight that they need to be excised completely. I mean, I think if you were to ask city legal or our council, they could cite examples of ordinance that haven't been used in a long time. I don't know. It's kind of I think that's homework for you to do.
Well, and I don't at all object to doing that homework. Again, I'm just trying to understand the viewpoint that it's fine to leave things in place even if we don't use them. I'm just trying to understand that viewpoint a little better. So
sure. Well, I mean,
thank you for your response.
Well, I'm the one asking the question, but I know you, Mr. Chair, if I may say, we addressed that by saying that committees have a function that's more than just referral of legislation. Committee of the Whole's only function is to hear legislation referred to it. Standing committees have more functions than that.
Okay. Would the sponsor of the amendment like to
Sorry.
Well, you were posing that question, I think, too.
I actually have a response.
Rosenbarger?
Go ahead.
Okay. Let's make sure that the sponsor has the ability to react to the question. Did you have anything, Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Sure. As I said earlier, just I guess not in this amendment, but I think it is important that we have options for different types of meetings, because I don't think everything that we might proactively want to do lends itself to committee of the whole. I think it makes sense, if something like the transportation committee is made up of 4 people who might want to proactively work a lot on transportation and then report out to all 9 members of council. I think that that's okay, right? And so I think just having that option, if it's the case, say the transportation committee wants to have a meeting and then it turns out all 9 members of council want to come, then okay, we could change it to committee of the whole. I mean, it's just really about being like nimble and flexible in a time with a lot of things changing out there in the world, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Schimballuri, I wanted to give you an opportunity just to add what you had to respond.
Try and be just slightly more articulate than I was before.
You're doing great.
So, what we've heard, I think this crystallizes my thoughts here. What we've heard so far is that standing committees give us the opportunity to be proactive. I agree with that. And I would also take the word standing out of that statement. I think committees, whether they're standing or special committees or ad hoc, can all give us the opportunity to be proactive. I have more comments on that I'll offer in final comment. But again, this is a discussion about tools that allow us to do our jobs. And again, the notion that only standing committees That's the only mechanism by which we could possibly be proactive. Just isn't a statement that I agree with. So
I don't know if that's directed at me, but is that okay if I respond to that?
it's a statement I've heard several times. So.
Oh yeah, I don't know if that's directed at me, but what I've said multiple times is this is about options, and what I just said in my immediately previous comment is that a standing committee is a good option, and if all 9 members want to tackle a proactive issue, then I think we would move that to committee of the whole. So I just don't think I said at all that it's the best choice, just that it's a choice.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you had your hand up for a question, I think. Did you?
Oh, it's moved now.
Would you still like to pose it?
No, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we're still on questions from council for Councilmember Rosenberger, the sponsor of Amendment 2.
Councilmember Volan has his hand up.
Okay, I'm just making sure that if anyone else has questions before we go back to Councilmember Volan. Okay, Councilmember Volan, please.
Yeah, again, even though this is an amendment by another member, I would ask the sponsors, consider if this amendment fails, how would the sponsors feel if 4 members created a transportation committee ad hoc and never dissolved it?
Is it a rhetorical question, or did you want to pose that?
No, it's a serious question, because if transportation, I mean, if several members believe that there's a need for a transportation committee, you know, how would the sponsors feel about one being made ad hoc that, you know, just seems to stick around for a while? I mean, how should council think about that ad hoc committee?
Resolution sponsors, would anyone care to? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I would simply respond here, and I do know I'll get rebutted on top of the rebuttal for the rebuttal. However, the presiding officer, the president, I do believe with the majority of the council can address committees or special committees that seem to go on forever and ever without giving a report or recommendations. I will just simply say BMC 2.04.240 says any 3 council members or presiding officer may form a special committee for any specific purpose proper for council consideration. The committee shall cease to function when it has completed its duties and made a report or recommendation to the council. That is my response. Thank you.
Council President Sandberg, you had something to say?
Well, my response is with respect to transportation / sidewalks, and with respect to what we'll be addressing in Amendment 3, there will be standing committees that can address these issues in a very seamless manner when we get to that point at the end of the discussion on Resolution 2202. And with respect to special committees, as Council Member Sims has just cited, that is your option. That is your prerogative. If any number of you wish to do proactive work or research on any one topic, that is perfectly acceptable for you to do. But I would hope that you would wait to see how we intend to keep the Climate Action and Resilience Committee intact and the Transportation / Sidewalk Committee intact to continue the good work that has already been started. And we're hearing a lot about compromise. And after very careful consideration from the discussion last week, we agree. We agree that those committees have done excellent work and they need to continue. And so again, I hope to deal with that at the resolution of Resolution 2202.
Councilmember Scambolari, did you have anything else to add to that question? No?
Mr. Chair, if I may respond to these answers. First of all, I don't appreciate.
I think
I'd like to follow up.
Well, with further questions.
So in other words, every time I ask a question,
you received an answer. Well,
whatever, Mr. Chair.
no, I may come back to you, but I saw that the sponsor of the amendment, Councilmember Rosenberger, had her hand up too. Would you like to respond to the question or the comments that were made?
Certainly. Well, I was just going to ask a question from President Sandberg. Comments. If we're continuing the work of the Sidewalk and Transportation Committee, why don't we just keep the name the Transportation Committee? That's just all my amendment.
Right. It's the sponsor's wish to make a break in the way we do business, not respective to policy. It's a manner of doing business that we feel is more efficient, more effective. It's more fair to us as council members. It's more fair to the staff. It's more fair to a lot of people. And my objections to both Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 at this point is that tends to want to unravel what we're attempting to do here, which is to return the focus to the committee of the whole, which is all 9 of us versus any 4 of us. It's not to stop any momentum. It's not to stop the important work of this council in any way, shape, or form. And so that is our intent, and that is what we hope we can keep intact as we move toward the resolution of what we intend to propose, which is a change in process in how we do business.
Councilmember Volin, go ahead, but do frame it in terms of a question.
I'm trying to. I had a follow-up question for their answers. But I also want to point out that I'm not particularly fond of being mocked for preserving the right to rebut. I wanted to say the same thing about the transportation. I mean, why should the Transportation Committee not exist, but the Sidewalk Committee become a standing committee? Is that really the only? I mean, that and Jack Hopkins are the only things that deserve to be made standing. I mean, the sponsors clearly support some standing committees, but just extremely narrow ones that used to exist before 2019.
Yes. Okay. Do the
That's a
sponsors
question.
care to? Any of the sponsors care to reply to that question? Councilmember Scambilleri.
Yes, thanks. Not speaking for my fellow sponsors, but in my mind, what distinguishes Jack Hopkins, 2 things distinguish Jack Hopkins and Sidewalk. One is that they have a very specific recurring task, and 2, they have responsibility for money. And that makes them, in my mind, qualitatively different. So that's the response I would offer you. I'm not sure if it's satisfactory to you or not, but that's why I think differently about those committees. So.
They're not responsible for money. They're simply making a recommendation, like every committee does. So when, the Land Use Committee and the Transportation Committee makes recommendations too. They're often making, I mean, never mind. I'll stop. Thank you.
Councilmember Flaherty, you had your hand up.
Thank you. My question is for the amendment sponsor. It was prompted by President Sandberg's comment that there was an effort at compromise, which to me implies people with different viewpoints coming together and working together to find some sort of common ground. I know I wasn't approached as the sponsor of Amendment 1 about what might constitute a compromise. Were you approached, Councilmember Rosenberger, about Amendment 2 and what would be a compromise with respect to transportation and sidewalk?
I was not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further council questions before we go to the public? We can entertain more questions when we return. So let's go to the public. Mr. Lucas, do we have participants who would like to comment?
Yes, I believe so. And I see a few hands going up at the moment. If other members of the public would like to indicate their desire to comment, please use the raise hand feature, which you can hopefully find in your control bar by either clicking the reactions tab or the more tab. And if you're not able to locate that, please send a message via chat to the meeting host and we can recognize you that way. First up, I believe, was Natalia Galvin.
Ms. Galvin, thank you. And I believe we'll adhere to our 3 minutes time allotment. So.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Natalia Galvin. I'm a Bloomington resident. I am also the 2022 president of the Monroe County chapter of the National Organization for Women and the current chair of the 9th District Latino Democratic Caucus and work regularly on equity issues. I'm here to speak in favor of Amendment 2. I was happy to be contacted by community leaders on this amendment and grateful for the discussions we had. I strongly agree that the Transportation Committee is an important channel to support better equity, accessibility, and mobility for Bloomington residents. My dad had a life-altering stroke at the age of 55 and has been confined to a wheelchair for the past 13 years. He will be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. I've also helped provide care to his sister for the past 20 years after her life-changing stroke, as she will also be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. I only mention that because until these serious health issues impacted my family directly, I didn't realize how important these complex, proactive transportation discussions are, especially around this issue, and how much more we can do in our city to expand those services. Certainly more discussion than would just fall under sidewalk. I hope we continue to have thoughtful debate around this issue through dedicated proactive transportation committee work. I hope you will support Amendment 2. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next up is Deborah Meyerson.
Ms. Meyerson, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wasn't sure if the unmute had worked. Thank you. My name is Deborah Meyerson. I appreciate the opportunity to comment this evening. Transportation, accessibility, and mobility are very important to me and my family. As the parent of a son with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as mobility challenges, he just turned 19 yesterday, we regularly face challenges posed by accessibility gaps in the community. As an advocate for transportation, accessibility, and mobility, I'm here to encourage your support for Amendment 2 to preserve the Council Standing Committee on Transportation. While there certainly are other matters that can be reasonably directed to the Committee of the Whole, retaining the Council Transportation Standing Committee is an important channel to lead Council's consistency, effectiveness, and equity when it comes to local transportation policies and budgeting. Examples of issues that a Standing Council Transportation Committee would be instrumental to address: to help navigate the ongoing issue of an inaccessible downtown flagstone sidewalk that has been nonetheless been designated as historically significant, pursuing enforcement with scooter companies to manage scooters that block curb cuts and create obstacles on sidewalks, anticipated the impact of personal delivery devices, delivery robots before they pose new accessibility problems in the city, coordinated with planning and transportation staff to support changes in the city's prioritization of sidewalk projects, ensuring that once the city's ADA transition plan is indeed updated, there are applicable policies and annual budget to support implementation. Some might note that Council could appoint 5 special committees to study and make recommendations on each of these issues. Yet surely it would be far more consistent and efficient to have a single standing transportation committee instead of 5 or more special committees, as additional transportation policies and budget matters inevitably arise, as well as foster valuable continuity to span across election cycles. Some might observe that these transportation matters deserve the attention of all 9 members of Council, that these issues will indeed have the full attention of all 9 Council members when a policy or budget on the agenda comes up for a vote. It would be far more consistent and efficient for a standing committee of 4 Council members who can specialize in the multi-layered transportation policy issues that arise. Everyone benefits from accessible systems. Rather than relegate accessibility to the reactive nature of an ad hoc committee, a standing transportation committee can support an ongoing commitment to steady improvements for transportation accessibility for the city. Thank you for your consideration and support for Amendment 2 to this resolution.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Lucas.
Next up is Sarah Mosier.
Ms. Mosher.
Yes, can you
Welcome.
hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak in support of this amendment. I think that we as a community should retain and preserve the Standing Committee for Transportation and the other ones that have been discussed for that matter. It doesn't really make sense to me why you would get rid of it. It does seem very useful, and I think that you should preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next up is Janice Sorby.
Ms. Sorby, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to briefly.
Please introduce yourself, just
Sorry,
for protocol.
My name is Janice Sorby, and I've been very interested in this process as a whole. I am encouraging you to not vote for this amendment. I feel that I'm hearing a lot here tonight about, well, we can do research and we can specialize and we can, get really serious work done that way. And I know that this is always a big question for representational government, but I hear nothing about constituent work. I hear nothing except specializing. And that is really frightening to me, that people want to specialize and they want to do the research and this and that, but nothing about talking to the citizens of Bloomington. So that's all I wanted to say, that this does not sound very democratic. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Lucas.
I think that is the extent of the public comment at this time.
We'll just give it another moment to make sure that we've included everyone. Okay, I don't see anyone else queued up. So let's return to council for further questions and then comments. Are there questions remaining? Seeing none, let's go to council comments on Amendment 1 of Resolution 2202. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you may begin.
Thank you. And this is on Amendment 2.
Amendment 2, sorry.
So I wanted to express my support for Amendment 2. I think the Transportation Committee does have ongoing work to do. And I want to respond to some of the comments that my colleagues and members of the public have made. First of all, the use of special committees versus standing committees, such as the Transportation Committee. To call into being a special committee, you need to know what the issue is, right? Because you have to create a task. You have to task the special committee with something specific. That's part of the definition of a special committee. But let me caution you that sometimes we don't know what the tasks are yet. At the risk of quoting Dick Cheney, there are known unknowns, but there are also unknown unknowns. So there are sometimes things that we don't even know we need to explore. So we wouldn't get to the point of creating a special committee. And therefore, a standing committee is a better option because we know there are certain areas of policy and issues that concern the public that are ongoing. And I think transportation is certainly one of them. To respond to the idea that an ad hoc group of self-selected council members could certainly get together and form a special committee and do whatever research they want to do. I think this this places an unjust burden on some council members. I think standing committees, as envisioned originally, 22 months ago, were just the the work was distributed equitably among council members so that each council member served on 2 or 3 committees, each one chaired one of the committees. And I think that if we have some less number of standing committees, I think certainly each council member should serve on one of them. If you say, oh, self-selected CMs can go and council members can go and do whatever they want, first of all, there's no buy-in then that the rest of the council members would listen to their report. And secondly, so that's saying, okay, those of us who want to do more hard work should just go ahead and do it. That just doesn't seem right to me. And then, of course, this has been addressed before, but Council President Sandberg at some point said, oh, we're going to keep the Sidewalk/Transportation Committee. So I think Councilmember Rosenbarger already pointed out that what has been proposed in the resolution is not to keep the Transportation Committee, but to keep the Sidewalk Committee only, which has a much narrower focus. I agree with members of the public to talk about accessibility issues. We have a lot of problems in this community of not providing accessible pathways for people with various types of disabilities. And, ADA is a very low bar. We need to actually aim higher than ADA compliance. Recently, the Council on Community Accessibility has a committee that has been working on accessibility guidelines that should inform all of our transportation decisions. And they actually reached out to Councilmember Smith as chair of the Transportation Committee and are planning to make a presentation to that committee. So this is an actual present example of something that the Transportation Committee should and was planning on looking at. I guess the recommendations could go before the whole council, but who is going to take the time to actually follow through with these recommendations and shape them into legislative policies? I don't know. I guess whatever council members are more activists, so to speak. As far as what Jan Sorby said, what about constituent work? First of all 9 of us do constituent work every week. This is something that is definitely part of our job that we would do regardless of whether there is a standing committee or not. Part of the research that several of my colleagues have talked about that standing committees could do is to reach out to constituents. That's part of research, is to have constituent meetings and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or to go to neighborhoods where perhaps there are people of lower incomes that don't have the extra time to go to constituent meetings, but actually go to their meetings and say, hey, Crestmont Resident Council, what do you guys think about this? I mean, that standing committees would provide the framework for more constituent outreach on issues that are important to the community. So for all these reasons, I'm in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Who would like to go next? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Since I'm the chair of the Transportation Committee, I figure I should opine a little bit on this. Transportation Committee, it really didn't function really very well as a standing committee. When we had functions such as related to the equity issues that we dealt with in the Sidewalk Committee, that was great, and that worked out really well. The Council on Accessibility contacted me through my friendship with Michael on the CAC, the Council on Accessibility, and asked me if we'd like to hear the kind of the draft and what they're starting on the accessibility plan. And I'm the only one that went to it, and I think it's important to bring that forward. I spent a long time of my professional career working in disability services and studies, and I would be happy to be the focal point on the city council for those kind of issues. So I don't really think that the Transportation Committee is very functional and very essential. And I mean that in a very just neutral way. So I just wanted to say that because I thought that was an important part to say. Thank you.
Further questions? Comments? Pardon me. Councilmember Volin.
Several thoughts based on what my colleagues have said. Mr. Sims seems to be of the opinion that the council president can somehow wind down an ad hoc committee, which we don't have. I mean, I'd like to know how he gets that out of the city code that he cited. I think Councilmember Sandberg answered that question correctly. I think an ad hoc committee can stand as long as it wants. I would ask Mr. Smith, whose fault is it if the Transportation Committee didn't function well or wasn't very essential? Is he implying that somehow the other members of the committee, because they didn't appear at one meeting, rendered the committee dysfunctional or inessential? I don't understand his comment, but I think it does a great disservice to the members of the Transportation Committee who served with him. Also, I think that it was Donald Rumsfeld who said the unknown unknowns, but I take Councilmember Piedmont-Smith's point because we don't know what's coming down the pike. The theory is we appoint a slate of committees in advance and the committee assignments in advance, precisely so the council doesn't as a whole have to react ad hoc. But this idea has completely escaped the resolution sponsors. They also didn't have an answer for what would happen if a special committee on transportation decided to form itself and never disband. Why would such a committee disband if there was always something to be investigated? If the resolution sponsors really cared about staff, two of whom are this year's leadership, the sponsors, they would have thought twice before scheduling a committee of the whole last week on the same night as a regular session where they knew they were going to hoping to pass this resolution that night, and they knew it would be complicated and controversial. As a result, they made ESD staff sit through 3 hours of regular session only to have the meeting that they were supposed to appear at canceled because they too couldn't see what was coming down the pike and they had to be there. The canceling the Transportation Committee isn't making a break in the way we do business. The proposal overall is returning to the status quo from before this term. The experiment that the sponsors of the resolution claim has been happening for 22 months has been a farce. The sponsors pretend to be compromising. They aren't. Leaving this committee in, along with climate, would be enough of a compromise that I can imagine supporting the resolution as a whole. But it's pretty clear that the majority does not support this either, and I'm bitterly disappointed by it. And I had higher expectations of my colleagues that they would have put more thought and research into how committees work before they would advance a resolution this dramatic. Thank you.
Further council comment? Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. I just have a couple points based on the past discussion. Councilmember Piedmont-Smith made this point, but I wanted to reiterate after public comment that I did mention that I think standing committees are a good way for residents to be able to get in touch with people who are working on issues that are important to them. So I did talk about resident engagement being an important piece of standing committees. And I think Councilmember Piedmont-Smith's point as well, that research includes reaching out to everyone, talking to residents, talking to organizations. I think that was really good as well. One reason to keep the Transportation Committee, I think one council member said there needs to be specific ongoing work, and I can say okay to that. This this committee does have the ongoing work of making recommendations to allocate sidewalk dollars each and every year. So that's very specific and ongoing. A point I wanted to make last week, but we ran out of time, about special committees, that I think some council members were oddly debating the definition of the word shall, and thought that meant kind of like anything could be done or there's discretion there, but legally the word shall is mandatory. So for a special committee, when that work is done, the committee shall be finished. So there isn't discretion there. That's the word shall. May, there is discretion. So that's really not something up for debate. It's just the legal definition that's in our special committee code or language. Those are kind of my wrap up points there. I really hope that this standing committee can stay. I think from the comments we heard, it is really important to keep this going. One very small other comment, I was not able to, I'm on the transportation committee, and I was not able to attend the meeting yesterday because I was working at the YMCA. I work there one day a week, and this meeting happened to overlap. So I went ahead and sent that email to the rest of the members. So it's not that I'm not doing my job. I think it's just that I have other jobs as well. So I hope, for all the reasons that have been talked about in favor of this, that Amendment 2 can pass. It would just take one of you. I know it would be mighty nice if we could just have a little compromise, since we lack collaboration. Thank you.
Further council comment? Okay, I guess I'll make a comment. Firstly, I feel that the committee of the whole is a superior process, primarily because it includes all 9 people. And I think that's important at the point where legislation is initiated, or at the point where it comes to council for it to be reviewed. In terms of specialists in the council, they're still present in the committee of the whole. So they can serve in whatever capacity that they want at the committee of the whole meeting. So we don't lose that expertise. In terms of the sidewalk committee specifically, it has a very circumscribed role, it seems to me. That is, it has an allocation of rather modest amount of money that can maybe complete a couple sidewalks and initiate a couple others for review. And it has existed to apply that money to needs in the community and neighborhoods lacking sidewalks, and or where sidewalks are, where segments are lacking among sidewalks. So that specific purpose to me is quite different than a broader purpose of a transportation standing committee or a special committee. The special committee could be formed for the purpose of, for instance, studying the transportation plan and evolving legislation from that, studying, where our funds essentially intersect and how we can work forward on a cohesive and a holistic transportation plan. That's quite different than a sidewalk committee, it seems to me. And that can exist as a special committee. The difference is that legislation is not referred to a special committee. And I support that because it should go for the whole council. So I think the whole council concept, committee of the whole, is more predictable. It occurs at the same time every week. The public is going to be served better by that predictability. And it's inclusionary. All representatives are there, representing everybody in the city, not just 4 who represent a smaller subsection of maybe the community. So it's inclusionary. We get more brains looking at it, and it's predictable, and all the data show it's less work for us, actually, and less work for staff. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Flaherty, because you have a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to note that all those reasons Councilmember Rallo just shared would advise that we abolish the Jack Hopkins Social Service Funding Committee, abolish the interview committees that would be created, and abolish the Sidewalk Committee so all 9 brains can hear it in an inclusionary process. But I don't think we're going to do that. I'll be supporting
Not
this
what I
amendment.
said.
Thank you.
You're misrepresenting what I said. I said there's a specific purpose in mind for those committees, just as Councilmember Scambaluri said. It's really a different thing than listening to legislation that should come before the whole council. Councilmember Volin, do you have a comment?
Yes, I'd like to echo Councilmember Flaherty's comment. I mean, the terms that you and others, well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to address you individually just as the chair, but the terms that you and others have used to describe special committees are very vague. Well, there are more important things, other things, like you never get specific. I fail. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Flaherty. I don't see how there's any difference. And I know this is not a back and forth. I'm just responding that I find that to be wholly insufficient support for the point. Thank you.
Well, I did give specifics, but Councilmember Flaherty.
I wanted to clarify that I did not quote you or misquote you. I took your reasoning. Sorry, I took Councilmember Rallo's reasoning and applied it to its logical end with respect to other committees. That was not misrepresentation. It was taking a set of reasoning and applying it to a different context and how I see it fit. So just to be clear, I did not misrepresent Councilmember Rallo.
I lost the last little bit of what you said. But what I'm maintaining is that there are distinct differences between something that's circumscribed and applied and something that receives legislation as a standing committee does. And so the difference to me is that we should all be hearing that legislation. So just to be clear, and in response to Councilmember Volin, I said specifics about special committees, for instance, evaluating our progress on various topics, for instance, climate as the Sustainability Action Plan directs us to, evolving legislation that will help us meet that goal, studying that subject. There are many things a special committee can do. So I'm not talking vagaries, talking about specifics, just not receiving legislation that all 9 of us should vote on. So is there any other comment? Councilmember Rosenberger.
Yes, I'm sorry to weigh in on this as well. If it is inequitable and unfair and not serving the public as a whole for any fewer than 9 council members to hear something that could be recommended to council, it makes no sense that we have any committees with 4 people, and that includes Jack Hopkins, and that includes Sidewalk Committee. It's just, I mean, it must be inequitable, it must be unfair because everyone isn't represented at those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council comment? So just to respond, the council votes on those recommendations from those. So ultimately everyone is present, but there is a very circumscribed purpose for those committees that I think is justified. We know that the Jack Hopkins meets many, many times in order for it to evaluate the requests it receives in the allocations.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. How many opportunities to speak will the chair take in this debate?
I'm concluded, but I'll leave it open to you if you have any other comments. Seeing any other comments? Then we'll have the clerk call to.
Councilmember Rosenberger?
Did you get that?
I'm so sorry. Councilmember Rosenberger?
Yes.
Thank you. Sims?
No.
Volin?
Yes.
Scambalori?
No.
Sandberg?
No.
Rallo?
No.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Smith?
No.
And Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amendment 2 fails 4 yes to 5 no. Do we have another amendment? Councilmember Sims.
Yes, we do.
Would you like to move?
Chair. Actually, my question before we do that is a point of order, and I don't wish to be out of line. Will you keep the gavel, or will you now pass it back to President Sandberg? Just doesn't matter. I'm just trying to be clear.
I believe we're still in resolution 2202,
Exactly.
so
No,
I think it's best
I
that
think you're.
I continue.
I think you're absolutely right. I move to adopt Amendment 03 to Resolution 22-02.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Please have a summary of it, Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. The synopsis of Amendment 3 of Resolution 22-02 is this amendment is sponsored by Councilmember Sims and Councilmember Smith and removes the Climate Action and Resilience Committee from the list of committees to be dissolved. I will just offer a few words, and then Councilmember Smith can join in if he so chooses. My initial comment or statement on this was that I do in fact view it as a form of compromise or collaboration. But some of the other comments that I've heard this evening, some may not see it that way. However, I'm offering, or we're offering this amendment this evening. One, because of the urgency of the climate action mitigation, and it will be long-term. I think last week I heard 5 to 7 years was mentioned, but tonight I heard in perpetuity. But either way, this is going to be a very long process. I also know that the previous or the current standing committee has met with ESD and has set up, I think, a quarterly meeting schedule to check benchmarks and work with the city administration, specifically to enhance climate action mitigation. I will say this is not part of the amendment, but I will say that if this passes this evening, I would like to hope that those working on that committee and working with the city staff, it is my hope that those efforts extend beyond Bloomington city limits with regard to working and collaborating with our neighbors in hopefully at least in our contiguous counties. I just think it'll be much more effective overall if we can broaden our scope with regard to climate action mitigation. And also, we've also just approved this evening. We had already approved it, but we did an ordinance tonight because we expect the ESD program manager working in conjunction with Lauren Clemens. There will be a little bit more emphasis or more emphasis on the city's climate action mitigation strategies. Okay, and
thank you.
We ask for your support, and I will pass it on to Councilmember Smith if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. It is the issue of our lives right now. It is incredibly important. And also another factor that was in my mind to be a co-sponsor was this committee is a highly functioning committee. It is doing a lot of work. And it's important for this to continue and keep this going forward. So I think it's so important that this one, it's great to have it. The expertise that's on the committee is fantastic. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sponsors. Questions now for the sponsors. Councilmember Rosenbarger, you may begin.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, sponsors, for bringing this. I'll be supporting it. Just wanted to ask if you all collaborated on this with the chair of the climate committee.
I don't think
I did not. Did that answer your question,
Okay.
Councilmember
Is
Rosenberg?
there any other?
Yes, that answered it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Volin?
I'd like to ask the sponsors of the amendment to compare their support for it. Well, first of all, I'd like to ask what inspired you to author this amendment?
I will say that Councilman Flaherty's argumentation in our last meeting certainly made me feel that it was an important committee to keep and to keep moving forward.
And I will agree with Councilmember Smith, in particularly hearing the discussion in committee. Or I'm sorry, as part of that legislation, I thought was important. I also, and I still do, think that this is an act, I don't want to say an offer, an act of compromise and collaboration with some of our colleagues on this council. It's more important, I think, for the reasons that I stated in introducing this. But like I said, I thought a compromise or collaboration was part of this thought as well.
I have one more question, but I can wait.
Other questions from council members? First round. Okay, Councilmember Volin.
Yes, thank you. I think that it's safe to say that, and I think I've brought this up during this debate, another issue of our time is housing. It's on the topic in everybody's mind. Affordable housing is also an issue for our time. Perhaps it doesn't quite rise to the level of climate, but it's just below it, I would say. It was the subject of a 3-year-long ad hoc committee chaired by Councilmember Sandberg. The report of that committee is prominently featured on the council website. I'd like to ask the two amendment sponsors why an affordable housing, we had a housing standing committee, why that isn't merited as surely as a climate committee is.
Well, in my own, oh, sorry, Jim, you want to, Mr. Sims, you want to go ahead?
No, go right ahead. I stepped on your toes. I'll follow you.
Well, in my mind, it certainly isn't as important as the Climate Action Committee, and it is really an important issue. And I wasn't, I thought that cleaning up the idea of doing, we have a process, we want it to go differently now and have less standing committees. And this is one that I thought an issue in housing could grow organically out of, 3 committee members or more deciding that this is something to begin a housing ad hoc committee, special committee. And these issues are not for housing and other ones on these other committees. they're not going to not be addressed. They're just going to be addressed in a different format, in a different process of addressing them. So that's my explanation for how I thought differently about housing versus climate action committee. Mr. Sims?
Councilmember Sims?
Yes, and if I were to respond, my thought process wasn't weighing the importance of one against any of the others. I will just also add this, that 22 months ago when we, as a council, and I think it was 5-4 vote at that time, created standing committees. What we're doing this evening is no different than then. We're just simply going back to where it was. So, I mean, we're having a lot of discussion, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's really just that simple on the overall ordinance. This amendment, again, after giving it more thought and hearing some of the discussion with my colleagues, and Councilmember Flaherty, if I can mention that name without violating council rules, I thought that was important. And particularly with some of the additional investments that we're going to make. And again, not equating this importance with any other council, but with the investment we've made, and particularly with the ESD program manager, with an increased emphasis on, I do believe, climate action and mitigation, then to me, it was warranted. Again, I was hoping that it would also be viewed as part of a compromise. But the prevailing thought for me was the importance of dealing with this urgent issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions from council? All right, seeing none, we'll come back. We'll go to public now on Amendment 3 of Resolution 2202. Please use the raised hand function if you would like to speak. Mr. Lucas?
Yes, first up is Natalia Galvin.
Hello, thank you. My name is Natalia Galvin. I am a Bloomington resident. I want to keep my comments on Amendment 3 brief since I spoke in favor of Amendment 1 last week. Although I disagree with how much time important city issues will have to be discussed in committee of the whole, I want to thank Council Members Sims and Smith for their sponsorship of Amendment 3 and Councilmember Flaherty for his sponsorship of Amendment 1. I believe that supporting this amendment is a crucial step in cementing climate action as a clear city council priority, similar to Jack Hopkins, as we are in a climate emergency. I hope you will vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next up is Sarah Mosier.
Ms. Mosier, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to speak in support of this amendment, and I urge you all to support it as well. Just as I wish you had supported the other ones, I think it's very important to keep a standing committee on this topic because you need sustained attention of the council members on it, and standing committees help do that. And that was true for the other topics that we've discussed before in this meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Lucas.
I don't see any additional comment at the moment.
Okay, let's give it another minute or so. This is public comment on Amendment 3 of Resolution 2202. Any takers, Mr. Lucas?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, we'll come back to council for further questions or comment. Are there any questions? Comments? Anyone like to comment? Councilmember Volin? Councilmember Volin?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
sorry. You know, the sponsors of this amendment say that concerns like affordable housing are going to be addressed somehow, but like as we've heard before with the sponsors of the resolution, there's no plan in their minds about how they'll be addressed. It's just vague hand waving. Well, somehow something's going to come out of it. Yes, Mr. Sims has constantly reminded us of the 5-4 vote that created standing committees. I've heard him say it for almost the entire time that they've existed. I'll point out to him again tonight that 5-4 votes are ruling, only it's going the other way. If he or other members think that this issue is going away, they have another thing coming. The sponsors claim they're making compromise. They know full well that retaining a single standing committee from the slate that was passed in 2020 and the restoration of the status quo from before this term, and which stood for several terms before this one, is a mockery of the word compromise. I'll support the amendment, but it doesn't do enough to make me support the resolution. Thank you.
Further council comment? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Chair Rollo. 2 comments. First of all, I've heard some things tonight about the council's responsibility on certain standing committee issues. And one of the things that I have not heard, at least to my satisfaction, is the role in which we play in working with the mayor's office and the city administration. I will remind you again, this is not the city council's individual responsibility. This is with the administration and other groups and other public citizens that we'll work with, or that this committee will work with, and that we as a council will go. So for it to be characterized as, you know, what is a council going to do? What is a council going to do? We're going to do what we've always done. And hopefully that is to work in conjunction with the city administration, and then use the role of co-equal government that city council is. I'd also earlier like to respond to one of my council members, I believe it was Council Member Rosenbarger, and not to be overly specific, but the question was asked, did I speak with the chair of the Climate Action Standing Committee, if I'm not mistaken? And I responded, no. What I did not discuss, and I have discussed this with Councilmember Flaherty, or I'm sorry, let me back that up. What we discussed was the importance of the new position in ESD and some other climate action and mitigation issues and strategies. So I still stand by, no, I did not specifically discuss it with him. And I'm not even so sure if at that time if that was even really the forefront of my thinking. But I just want to clarify that. I don't want, there's an insinuation that there's been zero discussion. Now, specifically on this amendment, no, that did not occur. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. Other comments on Amendment 3 before we vote? Okay, this concludes then council discussion and debate on Amendment 3 of Resolution 2202. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sims.
Yes, sorry, I mean, I didn't want to cooperate.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rollo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Did I get cut off there? Yes.
thank you. Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Rosenberger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amendment 3 is adopted 9-0. Now we turn back to Resolution 2202 as amended. Are there any further questions? Councilmember Volin.
Yes, I'd like to ask the sponsors. Committees, by definition, have never been obligatory. Is it the intention of the sponsors to compel members to attend committee of the whole, because that has never been obligatory either? It's a committee. Do they believe that members should be compelled to attend committee of the whole?
Answers, Council President Sandberg.
I believe duly elected council members should want to attend committee of the whole, but of course, meetings are not mandatory. I don't know if there's anything in code that addresses attendance, and but of course, once again, this is our obligation in my mind as elected representatives to attend all meetings that are pertaining to the business at hand.
Councilmember Scamillary. Well, let's hear if there are other comments from sponsors.
No, I think that was adequate.
Okay. Councilmember Sims, did you have anything?
Oh, I think it was adequate as well. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Councilmember Volin, please.
Well, again, I'd like to, Councilmember Sandberg, remind you that, you know, you were appointed to committees that you said you did not want to attend. Didn't you have the same obligation to attend those committees that you believe we all have to attend the committee of the whole?
I really don't know what you're talking about in terms of committee meetings that I was assigned to. I did participate in them. One I did ask to be removed from with respect to other obligations that I was attending to, but another council person was appointed in my stead. But I think accusing me of not being in attendance at meetings is something I would hope that you would not go there with me.
What I meant was that with respect to the Public Safety Committee, which you were replaced on.
Yes,
so
that's the one.
I understand. Thank you. I have more questions, but I'll wait for a second round.
First round questions continued. Okay, Councilmember Volin.
Yes.
You can be the first of the second round.
Next question has to do with it's been part of it has been raised, but I don't understand why, if the budget goes to the committee of the whole and it deals with money, that Hopkins and Sidewalk shouldn't also go to committee of the whole. Why is it that these funds, which deal with money just as surely as the budget as a whole, should not also go to the committee of the whole? I don't understand that. Can someone explain it for me?
Councilmember Scamillary.
Yeah, this actually goes back, I'm sure, to a comment that I offered, and I did not articulate that as well as I should have. No, of course, the Jack Hopkins Committee does not decide what to do with the money. They only make recommendations. Likewise, the Sidewalk Committee only makes recommendations. It does not decide what to do. But those committees are, I think, rather unique in that they make specific recommendations about specific pots of money.
Well,
the Administration Committee, to my knowledge, did not do that. Economic and Sustainable Development, which I chaired, did not do that. So that's what I was trying to say, is that's what makes those committees distinct in my mind.
I mean, the budget as a whole is a number of pots of money, all the different funds that we have to approve. The committee of the whole is doing exactly the same thing, approving various pots of money. How I still don't see how that's any different.
And
okay.
And
sorry,
I've answered you as best I can.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Again, I'll wait for other members if they have questions.
Other members? Second round questions, anyone? Okay. Councilmember Volin, did you have another question?
Yes, I do. Councilmember Sandberg said last week that Public Safety Committee, Board of Public Safety, the CAPS Commission there was a working group I didn't write down, the Dispatch Policy Board, PS Lit, all addressed public safety, and that was confusing. But she also described our many boards and commissions. Our boards and commissions, I quote her as saying they were many and wonderful. So if it's wonderful that we have many boards and commissions, is the fact that they're confusing a reason for us to not have so many boards and commissions? What would Councilmember Sandberg say to that?
I don't recall the focus on confusing when I was listing those other groups, other than we have a wealth of organizations and commissions and boards and city administration efforts that are dealing with the issue of public safety. And
well, I mean, I'm
talking about boards and commissions in general, they address a number of issues that are part of Bloomington's character and part of the things that we prioritize in this community. And they're an opportunity for citizens to get involved in these advisory bodies. And so I'm not sure what your question is trying to get at, to try to call me out for some sort of hypocrisy. But I mean that. We have many, many opportunities to take a look at public safety, both from our standpoint and from those of the community.
But I mean, you did call them. I mean, I wrote this question down for a reason. You said that part of the reason it was a problem is that there's so many different bodies it confuses the public. So either it's good that we have, I mean, there's at least 1, 2, 3 different boards and commissions in that list: Board of Public Safety, Dispatch, and what was the other one? I don't know what that working group was. I didn't write that one down. But I mean, either we should have many commissions, no matter how confusing they are. I mean, why not boil down some of those boards and commissions? I mean, I think that they exist because they have different jurisdictions. So why is it inappropriate that the council too would have its own, working group, special committee on public safety? Do you think we need a special committee on public safety?
I don't believe we do at this point in time. But that would not be for me to determine. If there's another group within this council who would wish to form one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, let's go now to the public for their input on Resolution 2202 as amended. Mr. Lucas?
Yes, if there are any members of the public that wish to comment, please use the raise hand function, which you can find hopefully in your control bar by either clicking the reactions tab or the more tab. Or if you're not able to locate it, please just send a chat to the meeting host. And I do see one hand raised at the moment. Sarah Mosier should now be able to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Yes, I am glad that you were able to agree on one of the amendments. It doesn't really make sense to me, the reasoning for saying the ones who voted no on the other two. It seems like all of these standing committees should be maintained to preserve the attention consistently and efficiently of the council members on all these topics, which are all important to us in our daily lives in Bloomington. So it is rather disappointing to see the outcome after these hours that we've been talking.
Thank you for your comment.
Next, I believe, is Mary Katherine Carmichael.
Hi, good
Welcome.
evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have
Great.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Mary Katherine Carmichael, Public Engagement Director for the Office of the Mayor. Thanks for hearing me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of city staff this evening. I'll be really brief. We appreciate that this is an issue that is at the complete discretion of the council. So again, we're grateful to have an opportunity to share our collective experience with council standing committees over the last couple of years. I reached out to department heads who'd worked within this structure for their input. The majority of respondents replied that they found the standing committee structure added time, both in getting legislation through the process and added time in staff hours as well. Some concerns were expressed that standing committees added an additional layer of procedural complication, resulting in uncertainty about when something would be heard and by whom. The bottom line was that standing committees took more staff time and resources. It was felt that the same discussion was repeated at regular sessions. The additional time it took to make it, I beg your pardon, the additional time it took made it hard to schedule staff time and resources for some department heads. So that just sums up the staff comments that I rounded up. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Lucas.
I see no additional comments at this time.
Let's wait a moment. Okay, I see no others queued up as well. So we'll come back to council for further debate, questions, and or comments. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Chair Rollo. I'd just like to make a comment. I think last week, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard the term hatred used with regard to this legislation or some of the discussions of this legislation. I just want to repeat again how really unfortunate I think that terminology was. And I will repeat once again, Resolution 22-02, as the way I see it, is simply a choice to operate in a different manner than was established 22 months ago. There's a lot of discussion and debate, and we've talked about, but not to oversimplify anything. The bottom line is, and I hope it passes as a majority, we just simply wish to operate differently than we did when it was established 22 months ago or so. Thank you.
Who would like to go next? Any final comments? Councilmember Flaherty, I believe, was first, and then Rosenberger.
Thank you. It's hard for me to overstate how disappointed I am in 5 of my colleagues tonight. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenberger.
That was faster than I thought it would be. I having a hard time with this one, I'll be honest. I have some notes here. It is unfortunate to me, the severe lack of compromise. I think this resolution has taken 5 to 6 hours because 4 council members were not asked to weigh in during the drafting of it, which is, of course, legally allowed. I'm not sure how refusing to connect and collaborate serves our public. One reason I ran for council was because I saw a lack of compromise and collaboration between the mayor's office and council, and I really had high hopes that I could get in here and work with my council colleagues to make a difference in that space. I think in some ways we are making a difference, especially hopefully the budget process for this upcoming year. What I didn't know, though, was the lack of compromise and collaboration among council members themselves. And I am definitely a person that I would say really thrives on a team. And I thought that I was joining a team where we would work together, you know, because we have a lot of shared interests here in terms of making Bloomington a better place for everyone. So I am pretty shocked at the unwillingness of some council members to include others in drafting legislation. And that's even twofold when the whole point of this legislation is to say it's not okay for 4 council members to work on legislation together first. I think this is a good look at being a proponent of the status quo. I think we're returning to pre-2020 council processes here. And to me, the inability to adapt, to change, to try new things is staggering. The silver lining for me is that, of course, the Climate Action and Resilience Committee is staying put. And in terms of climate resilience, there are a lot of dire issues. There's housing, there's transportation, there's land use, there's sustainable development, there's community affairs, and there's public safety. So in a way, any issue that could have gone to a standing committee, I think, can go to the climate committee. So that to me is at least a good thing that we have that committee to look at work that could have been done by all the other committees. So I'll be voting no on the resolution.
Further comment from council? Councilmember Volin.
The sponsors don't like doing math. They don't like thinking about decision theory and how they might have to anticipate possible outcomes that might dictate a different schedule. That's how we got committees of the whole scheduled in the same night as a regular session. It's how we get the sponsors not anticipating the question of killing referral to committee of the whole by canceling the committee of the whole. The economic and sustainable development people who sat there last week for 3 hours in vain waiting only to find out that the committee of the whole would be canceled were not served by this. It didn't benefit staff. They had to be there because we might talk about their legislation. The sponsors say that they're concerned for the concerns of staff, but they can't seem to remember that standing committees have a scheduled end time so that they can be scheduled sequentially, and everyone who attends them knows when they're going to end, and everyone benefits from knowing that, including staff. In short, in general, the sponsors and the obvious majority here tonight don't get committees. They've never gotten the basic idea behind committees. They've never tried to get why anyone would create a set of standing committees. They don't get committees or procedure. They only know what they were used to back in the good old days when they're convenient.
Councilmember Volin, please address the legislation and not the integrity or the motives of the sponsors.
Mr. Rollo, I'm not. Once again, I'm being interrupted for something I didn't do. If you're offended by this, Mr. Rollo.
No, I'm not offended, but you did characterize the sponsors in ways that were personal, and I'm asking you to stop.
No, I don't agree with that, sir.
You just did. I mean, you called into question their motives. Please continue, but speak to the legislation.
Sir, the process for that is called taking down words. If you would like to take down the words that I said.
You said they didn't know how to use math. Did you not say that?
That's a personal attack, Mr. Rollo?
By saying that they are incapable of using mathematics? Addition?
I'm going to need the council to tell me what words are allowed to say that aren't.
No.
You're taking everything as a personal attack,
I'm
sir.
saying, no, I'm not. I'm saying address the legislation. Don't address.
I am doing that.
Yes. Well, proceed then, please.
I believe that the sponsors have not done their homework, sir. And they don't want to do their homework. They think reading the packet is enough. Is that a personal attack too, sir?
Yes, it is. It is. I think that's incredibly unfair. I mean, we're debating procedure. We're debating procedure, and there are pros and cons to both sides. So please address why you oppose.
I think that this is a partisan effort to. I mean, this is a factional effort to prevent deserved critique. And this is not the first time it's happened to me, sir.
You have the floor.
Until you interrupt me again. The homework, Mr. Rollo, has always been understanding why rules of order exist, why Roberts is set up the way it is, and how other ordinary assemblies like ours do business, and they have not done that homework. The sponsors claim that committees have been tried. The 22 months they keep saying has passed were really 10 months when I was president. The discretion of the two presidents who have followed me have not included any interest in referring legislation to standing committees. And there was the constant reminder from Mr. Sims that the committees passed by a 5-4 vote, as if to say that that doesn't count because it's almost not passing. The same is going to be true here tonight. But they haven't even thought about the process that they've already lived through. You said, Mr. Rollo, in your report earlier tonight that we should bring back the plan unit development, but you were wholly involved in the development of the new zoning ordinance that eliminated PUDs. What, were you too busy, overwhelmed by that massive piece of legislation to prevent that change? We're all busy. We're all overwhelmed. Dividing up the work among members has been willfully interpreted, misinterpreted as factionalism. Why aren't you supporting the professionalism of staff who do such heroic work, as the sponsors have been saying tonight, how important this is for staff? Why wouldn't you support a land use committee that was created in the wake of a PUD that wrought havoc on our schedule because we tried to negotiate it during a committee of the whole and a regular session in 2016? It caused the meeting to run until after 1 a.m. The hypocrisy here among the sponsors is remarkable. And yet here I am being told that I'm making personal attacks. There's no mechanism that the sponsors have thought about for a special committee to extend itself indefinitely. When I organized a special committee in 2012 on street design and engineering standards, it was created and ended in 2012. Why did the Affordable Housing Special Committee take 3 years to deliver its report? Maybe because the issue was important enough that it needs attention still? It's only the #1 issue of the Hamilton administration. They're proud of their record of having built affordable housing. Everybody knows that it's a big deal, but the majority here doesn't think that it's a big enough deal for the council to focus on it. I have more to say, but obviously my opinion is not valued. So I wonder why it is that the majority wants me to even show up to committee of the whole. Thank you.
Further comment? I'll take a minute to just reiterate. Do standing committees work? Yes, they can work. We've tried it. Does it work as well in my experience as committee of the whole? No, it doesn't. There are pros and cons to both sides, but I see the committee of the whole overall as the best mechanism. It's more inclusive because for a variety of reasons. One is it includes all council members and therefore all representatives of the constituents of Bloomington at the initiation of the debate on the topic of legislation that we receive. It also is predictable because it, instead of occurring at various times, morning, afternoon, evening of various days, it occurs on Wednesday evenings as people are accustomed to seeing council meet. I too was disappointed in 22 months ago when the council took action to create standing committees as opposed to committee of the whole, because I was opposed to them then. But I live with the will of the majority. In this case, we're doing exactly the same thing, except we're reversing it with the exception that we're maintaining a standing committee for climate action and resilience. But if there is a disappointment afoot, then I would just offer that I was disappointed as well 22 months ago. The difference then was there was a council member who was intrigued by the idea and wanted to try it and thought there was it was worthy of the trial, and we did. So whether it was 10 months or 22 months, we tried it, and what we found, or what she found, was, well, self-evident because she's a sponsor of the resolution to return us so to the committee of the whole. And what we've also found in the meantime, I think, is that staff is affected, that it is taking up more time and more resources of staff, both our staff and administrative staff. So for those reasons, I trend toward committee of the whole. Special committees, I absolutely support. They can study issues, evolve legislation, find out if we're keeping pace with our objectives and so forth. So, and report back to the council. I think that's a very good way in which we work as a council. So I'll leave it there and go back to any further comments before we vote. Councilmember Scambolery.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone who has offered comment this evening, particularly members of the public, on the resolution itself and on the amendments. I want to offer some reactions to things I've heard, not just this evening, but in recent weeks, both from my colleagues and from the public. Three themes in particular really struck me and seem to keep coming up over and over again. Okay, so first, standing committees are a widely used practice in municipal government. City councils and peer cities around the state of Indiana use standing committees, and sometimes they've done so for years or decades. And so we should operate in the same way. We should use the tool as well. Okay, a couple of things occur to me. First thing that occurred to me actually was the notion that Bloomington doesn't often seek to emulate the state of Indiana politically. But more to the point, I'm struck by a combination of comments I've heard over the last few weeks. Last week, it was asserted that council has a progressive faction and a status quo faction, and that it's the progressive caucus that's coming forward with the fresh new ideas that will improve government. I've already said on the record that I find such distinctions unhelpful, but I want to offer an observation. If standing committees are used by so many municipalities, then it seems to me that standing committees are actually the status quo in municipal government. And that Bloomington's choice years ago, before many of us were ever even a part of it, to use a different tool, committee of the whole, was actually the more progressive approach. Second, without standing committees, we are unable or at best unlikely to be proactive. I would respectfully disagree. We've all seen and probably served on standing committees in multiple settings beyond just the city, committees that languish and drift or don't meet at all because they lack direction and a clear set of goals and objectives. In such cases, a special committee, the formation of a special committee may well bring the clarity and focus that promotes proactive work. Third theme I heard a lot of, issue X, fill in whatever issue is particularly important to you. Issue X is so important that it requires a standing committee. If we give up a standing committee on issue X, then it must mean we don't care about issue X. I would argue that some issues are so important that they demand the ongoing, not sporadic, ongoing attention of every council member, not just a 3 to 4 member subset. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is one such issue. I believe public health is another example, and I believe climate action is another. I respect the viewpoint of those who believe that our efforts in climate action will be compromised without a standing committee. I also understand that current members of the Climate Action Committee want to continue the work they're doing as a standing committee. And so in what was a sincere effort to offer some compromise, I was happy to support Amendment 3. I also believe that overall, standing committees have not shown themselves to be the best tool or even the better tool for managing council's workload. And so I'm pleased to be a sponsor of Resolution 2202, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Further council comments? Seeing none. Councilmember Volin.
I'd just like to know if this is the second round.
I believe it is, yes.
Councilmember Scambolery's statement that standing committees have been used sometimes for decades elsewhere, I think grossly understates it. Standing committees exist everywhere. They always have. They're a regular, ordinary, boring feature of any assembly. That's why everybody else has them. And the argument that somehow that's the status quo, I just find absurd on its face. If every member must pay attention to important issues, And when, you know, and everyone that has to pay attention, then no one does. This is a truism. That's why we focus. But I want to remind Councilmember Rallo that when Resolution 2001 came forward, he immediately moved to delay it, arguing that it needed to be studied by 3 weeks. Then it was delayed by another 3 weeks. It didn't pass until March 1st. So we took the unprecedented step of forcing a resolution to be studied over 2 months, or 6 weeks at least. I don't see the same efforts to really think about this happening with this resolution, if it's really, you know, that important. And, you know, I'd also point out that the chair doesn't even understand his own obligation to the council. He reacted to my speech before giving the other members a first round chance to speak. The obligation of the chair is to serve the other members, not to cut in when he feels like he has to retort before anybody else does. He represents the very factionalism that the majority is palpably afraid of from our faction. He doesn't even know the process for taking down words. If he has an objection to something I've said, he can call me out. There's a parliamentary procedure for that too. But it just underscores the majority's lack of having done homework, which again, the chair has accused me of accused that of being somehow a personal attack. The absurdity of this whole process, of the logic of the majority is profound. And I despair for the future of this council.
Further comment? Seeing none, that concludes our discussion and debate on Ordinance 2202 as amended. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Volin,
No.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
No.
Rosenbarger,
No.
and Sims.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2202 is adopted 5-4. And now I will turn the gavel back to President Sandberg.
Thank you, Councilmember Rallo. And with the adoption of Resolution 2202, I would like to take this opportunity to appoint the standing committees that will go forward from this point, and starting with the interview teams that will be responsible for the vetting and the appointments of our boards and commissions. So interview team A will consist of Councilmember Rosenbarger, Sims, and Smith. Interview team B will consist of council members Flaherty, Scambalori, and Bolin. And interview team C will be council member Piedmont Smith, Rallo, and Sandberg. Also, I would like to appoint the standing committees. The Sidewalk Committee will be composed of the same group that was the Transportation Committee, in the interest of a smooth transition and keeping the momentum going. I would like to keep that committee the same, with council members Smith serving as chair, council member Rallo, Rosenbarger, and Bolin. The Jack Hopkins Social Services Committee will consist of Sandberg, council member Scambalori, council member Sims, council member Smith. And the Climate Action and Resilience Committee will again remain the same, with council members Flaherty, Piedmont Smith, Rallo, and Rosenbarger. And if council member Flaherty would remain as chair, again, I want to make sure that we have good continuity with the work that has already been done and will continue on into the future. All right, we move now to legislation for first readings.
Madam President, I move that ordinance 2204 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
Thank you. And will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2204 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Administration and Personnel regarding amending Bloomington Municipal Code 2.12 Boards, Commissions, and Councils to make certain commission memberships easier to fill. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is authored by Councilmember Volin and amends Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code, Administration and Personnel, to adjust the membership requirements of various commissions. It changes one seat on the Parking Commission from mayoral to council appointment. It also reduces the number of members on the Citizens Redistricting Advisory Commission from 9 to 5 and simplifies the membership selection process.
Thank you. And with that, I will refer ordinance 22-04 to the committee of the whole on January the 26th at 6:30. And with that, we move into additional public.
Madam President.
Yes.
Please, yes, I'd like to move that ordinance 22-04 go straight to the regular session on February 2nd.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion on this before we move to a roll call vote? Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. You have your hand up?
Yes, yes. I think the motion is actually to discharge the committee of the whole from considering the referred item. So I just wanted to clarify that. Is that right, Councilmember Flaherty? Do you accept that revision?
Yes, I think that's probably appropriate since I think also a motion to introduce now automatically functions as a referral in and of itself. So when we all voted 9-0 to introduce, that was itself a referral. So yeah, without objection, I would amend my motion to discharge the committee of the whole and of its duty with respect to 2204.
Thank you. And then I would just add that in my view, the 2204, since it just makes a change to appoint to change a mayoral appointment to a city council appointment on a sidewalk committee and makes one change to the redistricting committee so that we can actually fill that committee. I think it's pretty straightforward. So that's why I support this motion.
Thank you. Any additional comment? I see a hand up from Councilmember Bowman.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I support the motion to discharge. I just want to point out that there are commissions we're changing, not committees. We've been talking about committees a lot tonight. But yeah, it's a pretty perfunctory thing, and I would support discharging the committee of the whole. Thank you.
Any additional comment? All right, seeing none. Are we ready for the question? Can we call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sandberg,
No.
Rallo,
No.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
No.
Volin,
Yes.
and Scambaluri.
Yes.
All right, and that passes 5-4, and so this will be referred to the next regular session. All right, we are now to discussion of our council schedule. And Mr. Lucas, what do we have ahead?
Madam President, do we have second attempt for public comment? Second
I am
availability
so
for
sorry.
public comment.
I am so sorry, I'm getting ahead. Yes, this is the opportunity for a second round of public comment on items that are not on our agenda this evening. And so if we have anyone who wishes to make a comment, now would be the time. Mr. Lucas, if you could help locate
Yes, and I'll
raised
just-
hands.
I'll remind any members of the public still with us that they can raise their hand by using the either the reactions tab or the more tab in their control bar. And if you're not able to locate the raise hand feature, please send a chat to the meeting host and we will recognize you that way. And perhaps we can give it just a couple of seconds here. Don't see any takers right off the bat.
And it does not look like we're going to have additional public comment. So with that, Mr. Lucas, now can we discuss the council schedule?
Yes, thank you. The first item that the council may want to consider is canceling next Wednesday's committee meeting, given that there will be no items of legislation referred to any committee. So if the council would like to cancel next Wednesday's meeting, could do so by motion.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, moved in second to cancel the committee of the whole next week. Let's call the roll.
You give me just one moment, Council
Sure.
President. I'd appreciate it. Okay. Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Rose. I didn't hear that.
Yes.
Thank you. Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
No.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes. And that passes 8-1. So there will
Yes.
be no committee of the whole next week.
And I apologize, I should have combined these items, but the council also has a scheduled work session this Friday. And at the moment, there doesn't appear to be any legislation that will be ready for council preview. So if the council would entertain a motion to cancel this Friday's work session, I think that would also be appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on canceling Friday's work session?
Yes, and quick question, council members. I didn't actually hear who made that motion.
I guess I did.
And second, Scambaluri.
Thank you both. All right, and we'll start with Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, that passes 9-0. No work session this Friday. And with that, we have concluded our business for tonight. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you all very much for your time and your attention. And we are adjourned for this evening.